In an ever-evolving digital landscape, for your business to thrive, you must adapt or die. Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the podcast helping you harness the power of AI and marketing tools to revitalize and grow your business. And now here's your host, marketing expert and author of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI, Emmanuel Rose.
Welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Age of AI, in the continuing theme of podcasts being critical activities. We have the pleasure of talking today to Mike Allton, who is a storyteller, an AI enthusiast and implementer, and the host of 4 podcasts, which in and of itself is a sign of a certain kind of insanity, Mike.
I could not agree more. In fact, it's even worse. It's 5 podcasts. I've got 4 with my full-time job at Agorapulse, and then because I had nothing better to do, I started my own podcast.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I have 2 podcasts of my own because they're so disparate. But as marketers, we're always niching, and so it's like I've had to fight that impulse to start a third podcast because it is as enjoyable as it is. It is a time-consuming endeavor. But what I really want to dig into is that this idea of we were talking earlier about 2025 and the importance of the podcast, and it's kind of the antidote to the AI flood that we're getting. So talk to me a little bit about how you're seeing implementation for clients and for yourself in terms of building authentic voice and a real depth of brand from podcasts.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned niching down because that's exactly what we've done at Agorapulse with the 4 podcasts. Each one is essentially the same show, same format, same premise, but we're just talking to each one of them a different ICP. So we started with talking to marketing agencies. It's one of our core ICPs at Agorapulse. We're a social media management tool, and that's where I work full-time as chief storyteller. And then we started Social Pulse podcast retail edition, talking to social media managers who work in retail, and then social media managers who work in B2B, and social media managers who work in hospitality. And so in each one of those, I'm inviting the target audience to come on the show and talk to me about the challenges that they're seeing in their space. So it's either agency owners, or all the other ones are usually social media managers, the people who would particularly use our tool. And what's, I think, really relevant today is, yes, we're doing it to create content, but that's not why we started them. We started them so that I could literally build one-on-one relationships with the guests.
Right.
And the guests on these shows are the same people that we want to sell to. We want them to use our tool. They're literally the same list of prospects that our BDRs and sales team, might be reaching out to on LinkedIn.
The genius of prospecting by interview.
Right.
And you're getting them to open up and tell you exactly the pain points, right? I mean, that's
exactly right. Yeah. For those of you listening, if you were thinking about doing something along these lines, it is so powerful. First of all, you want to make a great impression on this individual, so you're shining a light on them, and that's the whole point of a podcast interview. It's not for me as the host to talk. I talk this much during the show. I laugh because our video team is always creating like short social snippets, video snippets, right? And they always do the stacked approach where it's me on the bottom and the guest on the top, and the guest is talking, and almost every single one, all I'm doing is nodding.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
at least you're not picking your nose.
Nod.
See, that's how
right.
you know you're a professional.
Right. So we're first and foremost building relationships with these individuals. We're shining a light on them. But to your point, I've got a couple of key questions that I make sure I always ask these guests. And they're always telling to me, usually it's something on the lines of, how are you currently measuring the business impact of social media today?
Yep.
And if you're in marketing, most people if they get asked how they measure social media, they're going to talk about, well, follower growth, right? And likes and engagement, which we often refer to as vanity metrics, because
Exactly.
that's not a direct correlation between a business result. I grew my account by 20 people last week. Cool. Did any of them buy?
Right.
That's the real question. How do you know? That's what we're trying to dig into in a lot of these interviews. How are you measuring that? And what's fun as the interviewer is I don't care how they answer. They can say whatever they want. After we're done with the interview and we're back in the green room, then I can have the real conversation with the guest, depending on what they said. This doesn't always work, but if they say something like, and this happened, oh, I'm spending a couple hours a month updating a spreadsheet, going back and forth between Facebook and Meta and Google Analytics, that's a huge red flag to me that they need a tool. They need help.
Sure.
They don't have our tool, but I'm going to tell them, look, there are tools out there like ours that can do all that for you automatically. And then you just push a button and now you have a report and you're tracking all that information. So that's a real key part of these conversations, is to make sure that while the whole part of the conversation go anywhere you want, there's got to be parts in it that you can use as the interviewer as a potential lead in to further conversations.
Yeah, that's powerful, and I do love that you're getting in, niching it. How frequently are you producing these for each of those different niches?
Well, we established now this cadence where each show comes out every other week, and we alternate the show. So each week there's 2 new podcasts and blog posts published by Agorapulse. So like agency and retail came out this week. Next week it might be B2B and hospitality. That means that for me personally, I need to interview 6 guests for each show per quarter.
Oh, that's not too bad.
It isn't. It isn't too bad. And I have all kinds of AI tools and other kinds of tools that I'm using to help me that we can get into if you want to.
Absolutely, yeah.
That help me streamline that process.
I love the tech talk and the tactics. So yeah, let's talk about from booking to recording to post production and publishing. Let's do those 4 steps.
Yeah. So the booking is almost entirely based on LinkedIn right now, where I'll be looking at either lists that I know my sales team is doing, or I'm just doing my own research in LinkedIn or Sales Navigator specifically. And I'm trying to surface, again, prospective guests, people who are managing social media for, relatively decent sized retail brands. Like I've talked to JCPenney, Stanley Black & Decker, Microsoft, brands we would know.
Yeah.
And I use a tool called Duck Soup, which allows me to look at someone's profile on LinkedIn, and if they look like they're a good fit, I enroll them in a workflow specific to the show that I want to invite them to. So let's say it's retail. If I enroll them in that workflow, it automatically, within a certain amount of time, sends them a personalized connection request. It says, hey, Emmanuel, I'm Mike. I do this for Agorapulse. I'd love to bring you on our retail podcast. Period. End of sentence. Really short and to the point. If they accept, automatically within 4 hours, Duck Soup sends a follow-up message that says, hey, thanks so much. I'm glad you're listening to the podcast. Here's all the rest of the information. That's where I send them the link to the booking site and all that information. I pay attention. I monitor it. So sometimes they might accept the connection request and then immediately ask a question where it would no longer be appropriate for me to just do the auto response. But I found on LinkedIn, most people, even if you send them a customized invitation that has like a question or something in it, they don't respond to that. They just accept the invite and then do nothing else. So when you set up those autoresponders, it works great. So that sends them, if they do it, sends them to a Calendly, simple Calendly page that has my calendar, but it's customized for each show. And they'll book a time and date at some point in the future. And then that sends them to a Google form that collects all their information and asks in the form, what do they want to talk about? And this is important because the form gets their name, their LinkedIn URL, other information my team's going to use like their headshot, bio, and so on. But there's a couple questions there that say, hey, what kind of challenges have you overcome in your business? Or if it's an influencer, because I sometimes do thought leaders, what would you like to teach people in this industry, for 30 minutes or less? So it collects all that information. And all that's fine. That process hasn't changed in over a year. What changed is a year ago when I was doing a different show, I would spend a couple of hours then in the week before the show, the actual recording, researching the guest,
Sure.
thinking through topics, coming up with questions, because I prepare all that in advance. You and I know when you're interviewing somebody who's used to being on shows, they're happy to just talk off the cuff. Like you and I, you did not tell me these questions in advance. It wasn't discussed. And that was fine because this is not our first time doing this.
Right.
Most of the people that I'm interviewing, though, on these shows,
they're like,
I'm their first interview ever.
yeah. Right.
It's something I had to remind myself because after the show, they'll tell me, "Oh, you were so great. You were just a great host." And I'm thinking, well, you're not comparing me to Oprah. You've never been interviewed before in your life. So I got to take that with a grain of salt.
For sure.
But I know because of that fact that I need to be super prepared ahead of time. I need to give them the questions. Sometimes I'm talking to brands that they've got to go through PR and legal. Like
Sure.
I interviewed
Yeah,
TikTok, right? All their answers were scripted. It was the
Right.
worst interview ever.
I bet.
Nice logo, but it was a terrible interview.
Yeah.
So I got to give them all that in advance. And again, so I'd spend a couple hours preparing a pre-show document with the whole topic and their description and everything. And then I discovered custom instructions, Chat GPTs, custom GPTs, or what I typically use, Gemini's gems.
Uh-huh.
And I realized, okay, I can build a showrunner
Right.
that will walk step by step through this, and I can feed it all this information, and it will create that pre-show document for me with really, really great questions.
Yeah.
So I built it so it does it step by step. I start a new chat. I say, "Hey, I've got a new episode. I'd love for you to help me prepare it," because I'm super polite to AI. And it says, "Cool, who's the guest?" And I say, "It's Emmanuel Rose." And it says, "Great, give me their LinkedIn." So I paste in the LinkedIn URL, and it goes and checks out your LinkedIn. And 9 times out of 10, it gets that information. Sometimes it can't read it. That's fine. I just got to paste in the bio. And then it says, "Cool. Are there any particular topics you want to talk about?" And that's where I paste in the answers that the guest gave me in the
Nice.
Google Sheet, right? I'm just
Yep.
copying and paste and it says, "Hey, they would like to talk about this, whatever this is." And it says, "Cool, here's 5 topic ideas based on their background and what they want to talk about." And I pick one.
Right.
And it says, "Fantastic. Based on the topic idea, here are 10 questions, or here's 10 titles for the episode." And I pick one.
Right.
And then it prints out 10 questions to ask based on the flow that I've already trained it. It knows what questions I want inserted no matter what the topic, right? I always want to ask, how are you measuring social media? And it crafts a custom introduction, like a 2-paragraph using the problem, agitate, solution framework that I typically like to use.
Absolutely.
I'm going to read that. And then it crafts a custom bio that I've told it, look at their LinkedIn, look at their accomplishments, and we want to pull those out and we really want to hype them up. And so this is really cool because I literally read this. I use it like a teleprompter type thing. I read it, I introduce it. I introduce the guest. I say, "All right, here's Emmanuel, blah, 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 blah. Hey, Emmanuel, welcome to the show." And I bring you in just like you did with me here in Restream. And it's so funny how many of these guests say, "Wow, that was the best introduction ever. I need to bring you with me everywhere, Mike," which is awesome. And I'm usually very transparent about how AI writes that.
Yeah.
But that's how effective it can be when you set up that kind of a solution. And it took that 2-hour time that I was spending investing in each one of these shows down to just 15 to 20 minutes
Right.
every time.
Yeah,
It's
that's
fantastic.
cool. It is. And there's probably 4 or 5 more steps you could use make.com or something to even streamline it another layer, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like fortunately to Agorapulse, I've got a whole team that once I do the recording, I'm hands off because I'm sure like you don't want to edit your own podcast if you don't have to.
I hate
I've
seeing
got a
my own
podcast
face.
editor.
I don't want
It's
to.
terrible. It's awful. So I've got a podcast editor who's fantastic, Jeff C. He edits Guy Kawasaki's podcast.
Nice.
I've got a VA that makes everything go forward. I've got a content team that handles the blog post, a video team, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm literally hands off.
Yep.
After we get out of the studio and I've moved the file.
That's nice.
With my own podcast, the AI Hat podcast. That's the one I'm running on the side. I'm personally talking to AI experts. I've interviewed now 70 AI experts in the last year.
Nice.
And that's the one where I'm going to be exploring more automation going forward because it's still all me. Now, I used to script, which is a godsend because I don't really need to listen to myself too much. I let it apply the studio sound. I let it take out the ums and ahs, and then I just listen to the whole recording and make sure. First of all, if I note any other people we mention or resources, so I can include that in the
Sure.
show notes, and
Yep.
any other major issues, like if there's technical issues. But that one's fairly easy to edit. But I'm going to be looking in the next quarter. Okay, how can I automate more of that? How can I take stuff off of my plate and let make.com, as you said, or somebody else take care of it?
Yeah. And then are you using? I know Descript. I mean, I haven't used that a lot, but we've used Opus Clip and ClipScribe. Those are the two that we use. So
I have not been impressed with Descript's clip selection. So the way I'm doing it right now is I'm personally listening to the entire interview again,
yeah,
which I don't mind, because during the call, like if I'm interviewing you right now, I'm very much in the moment, paying attention to what you say, but I'm also trying to think about, okay, how can I continue to move this conversation forward? What do I need
sure.
to ask next, right?
Yeah,
Whereas when I'm listening after the recording's done, I learned so much more.
yeah.
It's
I
that
believe
second
it.
or third time through.
Yeah,
So I'm choosing my own clips, and that's also exactly one of the things that I want to figure out. How, do I just pump it into Opus at that point?
right.
Maybe Descript will get better. But I like to do. I don't know if there's a name for it, but where you start the episode with 30 to 60 seconds of the guest, just
Yeah,
cold open, right?
yeah,
So I'm manually picking out those clips,
sure.
or any others that I'm going to use.
I love that. That's more what I call it Hollywood style in a very positive way, right? Where you bring in that action at the beginning to get everybody's
Yeah,
attention, and then set the scene afterwards. So that's classy. I like that, Mike.
yeah, yeah.
I do want to ask you nuts and bolts though on this interview, prospect by interview. What what are some of the metrics in terms of opportunities you're uncovering, and then sales or close rate or something that you're comfortable telling us about?
Yeah, and that is in fact what we're trying to look at, is how often are these interviews leading towards actual business results. We do track downloads and views, but that's
Sure.
just,
Again,
I
vanity.
don't know. It's vanity, particularly when you're talking about a podcast where I'm not designing this to be the next Joe Rogan experience. And I have
Right.
no illusions that this is going to get tens of thousands of downloads. It's not. Interview
Right.
format shows, are the hardest to really get out there. It's really how they're used.
Yep.
So first of all, it goes to a blog post, and that's the link that we typically promote, right? Is the Agora Pulse blog, whatever, for each interview. And so we're absolutely tracking, well, of all the people who come to that, did any of them sign up for a trial or ask
Yep.
for a product demo? That's what I was just talking to my CEO about this Monday. He's like, well, this is the cherry on top that we can, because we're not expecting somebody to listen to a podcast interview and then go sign up for a trial of Agora Pulse. That's not a reasonable train of activity, because we're not really talking about Agora Pulse in the shows. We rarely have Agora Pulse users on the show. Most of
Right.
the time, they're not users, which is the point.
Yeah.
What we really are tracking is how much are our sales team members using these episodes, and certainly the individuals themselves that have come on the show. So they come on the show. After the show, my VA puts them into our HubSpot
Sure.
as a guest, not as a marketing content, right? But we want to be able to know then, going forward, are there any further contacts? Do they end up in Salesforce as a lead? And
Yep.
sometimes they do. I mean, I've had several individuals, and I'll show you some secret sauce in a second. Several individuals after the interview want me to do an intro to our sales team. And the reason for that is because during the actual interview, like you and I are recording this call right now, we're 20 minutes in. At this point, I would say, look, folks, we're talking with Emmanuel Rose about podcasting, and I've got a bunch more questions for him that you're not going to want to miss. But first, let me share with you a story about how this marketing agency in Michigan is seeing a lot of success with Agora Pulse. And then I play a 60-second video, because we use StreamYard. I just pull that in,
Yep.
and the guest has to sit there and watch it. They have no choice. They're not going to leave an interview. They're in the
Right.
middle of it. So
Yeah.
they watch an ad, essentially, for Agora Pulse. And
Yep.
it's so funny how many times that sparks in them
Mm.
questions
Yep.
about, oh, we're not doing any kind of reporting to our executives. Maybe we should. Maybe I should take a look at Agorapulse, or, gosh, we're coming off of contract with our social media management tool. We should probably talk to Agorapulse. So those are the real fun
That's
metrics
beautiful.
that we're tracking.
Yeah.
How many times do the interviewee end up becoming a lead? And then, like I said before, how many times is our sales team using it in outreach? So we're starting to figure out how to track that, which is, none of this is easy. The podcasters in the audience know, man, podcast analytics are freaking hard, particularly when you want to tie them to real results. The one thing I'm testing, and I don't have an answer for you, so I don't know if this works, but I'm going to test HubSpot's podcast hosting.
Okay.
And what we're doing is, because I host with the Marketing Podcast Network, which is run by Jason Falls. It's built on Megaphone, and I love it. But I'm also going to upload episodes to HubSpot and use the podcast player that HubSpot gives us on our blog posts, and any of the landing pages. Like, we're going to create landing pages for these verticals and so on. And we'll put the podcast there. And in theory, if a known contact goes to a podcast or a blog post and engages with the podcast player, HubSpot is supposed to know that. And that's supposed to funnel then additional podcast influence on sales deals. So that should be really interesting for us. You'll have to ask me in a few months if it works.
I love it. Yeah, no, I love the granularity of it. And of course, it's always with marketing, our attribution has still not gotten easier.
No.
We have so much information and so little actual attribution, even now.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, but I think it's just the nature of the black art that we're a part of,
Yeah, and like I said, it's particularly bad with podcasts, where like Apple doesn't share any data outside of Apple.
Right.
You might get some data out of Spotify, but YouTube's not going to roll that data back in.
No.
So we end up having multiple sources of data, to the point where you really can't even look at it all. So what we're doing now is, I look at Megaphone, our host. I look at that data as a sample size.
Right.
That's how we treat it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and the idea, I think there's a few kind of spaces that podcasts can inhabit, right? And like, you guys have got a very clear prospect generation process, which I think is beautiful, and kudos to you for that. It's amazing. I took this on more as a content curation space, and in that there's so much horse feathers out there now, especially with AI, but also as a way, there's a portion of it, my show, that's, I want to meet certain guys, I want to talk to CEOs, see how they're deploying things, but really I want to know what the heck is going on, because I'm in my little silo trying to figure out how to use all this stuff, and what are other smart people doing to integrate it. And then if there's a few hundred other people who can get some benefit out of it, and then maybe I'll sell a book once a month, then that kind of meets the mandate for me as the content curation. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
plus
to your point earlier,
the content though, that's the other part, and I think that's where most small businesses are missing the boat, is that they're not getting the content dump that they need, and it's very accessible for once or twice a month.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, this is a platform that too many small businesses aren't leveraging, because they think it's too hard or too time consuming, and it's not really, because you could interview somebody for 30 minutes a week and have a really successul show,
or just be a guest, right? It just to go and guest it. It's super easy. I think the challenge is that a lot, at least what I've seen in the technical fields, like finance and some of those things, where guys get so tripped up over it being 100% accurate and no mistakes, versus it being, we're marketers, we're just talking about what it is right now, and we know it's going to change. So sorry, I interrupted you. You had something to say there.
Oh yeah, I was going to go back to the point that you made at the outset of the show, which is that what I'm doing for Agorapulse, and what any brand like yourself is doing when you're creating interview podcast content, is you're showing off your humanity, right? You're humanizing your brand. I am now, whether I want to be or not, all over Agorapulse's social media channels. You can go to our TikTok, our Reels, we're all over the place.
Yeah.
You're probably going to see me in a video, and that's humanizing the brand in ways that were challenging maybe years before, particularly for a corporate SaaS company like Agorapulse based in France. For goodness sakes, we want to talk about our product, but it's hard then to do that and stand out from all the other companies that are similar in your niche who are talking about their products and services. Yeah, but you put out a podcast, and that means you've got new content that you can share every week. And if you're taking clips out of it, like we've talked about, and creating short vertical clips, that it'll be different people talking every time, which is fantastic for a lot of reasons. But you've got that consistent host who's appearing over and over again. And you can throw in every once in a while a solo episode to really show off your own business's authority and expertise. I do that a lot with the AI hat. And that's just going to really help stand out, to your point, when there's so much AI generated content. And gosh, we haven't even begun to see. We think it's a lot of AI content now. Wait until what it looks like in 6 to 12 months. Wait until you've got AI agents that can talk to each other and operate each other's websites, and no longer it's not humans anymore going to the websites. It's just AI agents. It's going to be nuts for a while. So this is a really great platform for being human. Yeah,
no, I agree. And it really is an opportunity to be human, authentic, and to really be emotional in a way that, like you're saying, we weren't able to do just a few years ago. Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time. I'm very grateful that you came on to share your experience, especially with all those 5 podcasts a month is awesome. How do people get in touch with you if they want to talk podcasting or AI innovation?
Well, thanks for having me. I hope that this has probably sparked some ideas and maybe probably some questions in everyone's listening's mind. And so the best thing you could do is go to the aihat.com/connect, CONNECT. And that's where you can find my social channels. I'm on all of them. That's just a bad habit that I picked up. So if you want to find me on X or Blue Sky, whatever, you'll find a link there, or all the podcasts. They're all there for you to listen to.
All right. Well, that's outstanding. And hang out for me so we can chat after I close this out. All right. Thanks, Mike. Well, there you have it. You got anywhere from doing no podcasting to taking on a role of 5 different podcasts for 5 different niches. I think the overarching message, though, is get started doing something, even if it's guesting initially, so you can feel comfortable and confident with the process, but build that authentic brand in order to stand out in the avalanche of content. All right. Well, this is Emmanuel Rose, and this has been Marketing in the Age of AI. I'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emmanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.